North Carolina's healthcare system is a large multi-hospital system in North and South Carolina. We have approximately 14 facilities within a metro area of Charlotte. And as a way, healthcare facilities are always challenged with reduction of FTEs, right? And as a way to do that, our system came up with an operator system. So when people would dial the phone, all the phones would ring to a commonly manned telephone operation location that we called the 801 McDowell because that was the address. And you would get the operator, and then she would direct you to the appropriate hospital or physician that you needed to reach. Combined with that, as in most hospitals, your on-site operators used to perform and probably do perform multiple functions. I think we heard Mike say where his operators would perform other functions, and one of the functions that a lot of them perform is the manual overhead paging process. A way to take that away from them is, especially when they went to an operator system, is they set up an on-call process at our 801 center that was serving as a receiver of fire alarms. Because in the healthcare industry, we have what we refer to as, and yes, Mike, I am one of those fire geeks that knows the code, and part of that code is you don't really want to evacuate your healthcare facility. We defend in place. But to defend in place, you have to have an emergency response notification process where you send your response team to address and investigate any type of fire events. That was being done remotely. So when a fire alarm panel would go off at a facility, it would go to our 801 telephone switchboard operators. They would see the alarm. They would dial the appropriate extensions to reach the overhead paging system, and they would page whatever alarm they were receiving. And then they would also send a group of emails to an email, and then they would also send something that was what was called Zetron, which is actually the old Motorola pagers. And believe it or not, we still have physicians that like the old Motorola pagers. And so that old technology, even though we have a lot of smartphone devices now, is still being used in some applications, especially for paging and emergency notification. Well, as a result of an event that occurred at one of our facilities, we had maintenance call in of fire alarms or call in to the paging system and say, look, we're doing some work on this system. Don't call a fire alarm if you get a smoke detector. Murphy's Law had it that a kitchen fire occurred at one of the deep fat fryers, generating lots of smoke. The fire department came because the suppression system for the hood automatically dialed the fire department anyway. While the fire department's arriving on the scene, they're starting to vent smoke and put the fire out, and they hear an overhead paging operator come on and say, please disregard the alarm, this is only a test. So needless to say, that was the trigger event to realize that we had a problem. When we got into this, next slide, we did a flow process chart. And I don't expect you to read everything on this, but that was the flow process, right? All those red boxes on the left are fire alarm devices, and then you have Simplex, which is the monitoring company, and then you have University, the actual facility. Then you had 801 McDowell, which is the overhead paging operator, and then you had alarms eventually getting to the fire department. Note that the black lines all represent automated systems. That means the alarm is generated by a device, and it is communicated through an automated electronic system, and eventually would work its way to the appropriate authority having jurisdiction. Note the fuchsia or pink colored lines. All that spaghetti graphing there is a manual process. And so that was my challenge to Alertus. We knew what Alertus could do with regards to mass notification, but it's like, Peter, we needed Alertus to use that mass notification technology and create an automated process for fire alarm mass notification. And that's what Alertus was able to come up with us for. And the way it works, next slide. What we did, what Alertus did for us, is they took their backbone of their mass notification system. They come off of the fire alarm panel through an RS-232 output printer port. So all fire alarm panels can have a printer capability that prints the alarm. And that code that is sent out through a dot matrix printer is what Alertus has a module that's capable of receiving that information, looking for the alarm information, and disseminating that information to a server that will convert that to an alarm. So it leaves the fire alarm panel in a coded message. And one of our biggest obstacles was a fire alarm panel has 24 character limitation for the available number of characters you can have in naming a device. And that device character limitation results in creative abbreviations. A good example, you might have the number 1 ST FLR KIT SD. And a lot of our times, the operators, the manual operators that were seeing that alarm, they couldn't even understand that abbreviation. But what Alertus did, Alertus had a smart memory technology and also a 900 character library that we built from all the abbreviations that we used in our system, so that it would recognize ST as first, and FLR as floor, and SD as smoke detector, and KIT as kitchen. So what it does is it takes that truncated message and converts it to a plain text language. That is the first big bonus that we got from Alertus, because now we had the capability of automatically creating a plain text understandable language coming from that fire alarm notification device. That signal goes into our local area network that then goes to the a server. We started out with actual hardware servers, and now my IS folks are actually using a virtual server off the backbone of our IS system. Works the same way. I don't see any difference. But then it goes from that server and processes that message to the LAN, and it sends it out through multiple means and modals of communication. The first one is the Alertus beacon, and you've seen that mentioned earlier, and that's a normal functional use of sending and disseminating a message, although I don't use that Alertus beacon to send a message to people because it's usually in a telephone switchgear room where my overhead page amplifier is. And what that beacon will do is when it receives that alarm, it will send it to a text-to-speech module. It converts that message to a text-to-speech. It seizes the overhead paging amplifier, and it will actually make a voice page saying, facility alert, fire alarm, first floor kitchen smoke detector. So it takes that abbreviation and it actually does the manual overhead paging for us. It seizes the overhead paging system and sends that message out through the hospital. Now it also has the capability of sending that device through text, through a smartphone phone number, an email to a smart device or computer terminal. And the most important one is Alertus created a switch and an encoder that will allow us to send that message through a Motorola Zetron paging network. It basically is a radio antenna on the top of our highest facility here in downtown Charlotte. And so through all these this multimodal forms of communication, we can rapidly disseminate a fire alarm event in a given facility to the right people, the response people. We were averaging, when I started getting into that manual process, throwing out all the anomalies like a computer reboot that would take probably 5 minutes to do an overhead page. Throwing all that out, we had an average overhead page time of 172 seconds from the time the alarm went off until you actually heard a voice over the speakers. We now, with Alertus, we have a 3-second response time. Now, we also built in, at the permission of our AHJ, we built in 15 seconds of strobes and horns sounding simultaneously. Our AHJ says, you know, when the fire alarm first goes off, we want the horns to sound for a minimum of 15 seconds. So what Alertus will do is, Alertus has a built-in delay. Our fire alarm panel has an automatic silencing clock, and when that alarm goes off, the horns and strobes will go off. The horns will sound for 15 seconds. They automatically silence, and Alertus will then begin paging, you know, facility alert fire alarm. It does it 3 times in a 45-second period, and then it will continue making that page every 2 minutes until someone hits the reset button on the fire alarm panel. So the Alertus system recognizes when I reset that particular alarm. Another feature of Alertus is if I have multiple alarms, which under a real fire scenario you can expect to have. The first alarm might be a smoke detector. The second alarm might be a pull station when somebody goes into the room and realizes it's a real alarm and pulls a pull station. And then I might get a third alarm with a water flow alarm. If the fire grows big enough and sets off sprinklers, I'm going to get, you know, simultaneous alarms. So Alertus will track those alarms, and we'll say the first alarm would go off and say facility alert smoke detector. Then it would go off again once a second alarm comes in, and it would say facility alert pull station for alarm originating at the smoke detector. And then it would do the same thing for any water flows or any other subsequent alarms. So it's a really intuitive system that uses its technology to interpret what the signals are coming from the alarm notification devices, converts it to a plain text language, and can disseminate that in a multimodal form of getting that message out to the right response personnel that are going to address the situation. So it really was a solution that Alertus provided us for this automated fire alarm overhead paging and mass notification to replace this very cumbersome manual process.